On your podcast, let me tell you the story. Every other Indian publisher, no one agreed to publish it only for the fact that it had being Hindu.
I wanted to read books on India and Hinduism. All the books were either written by white people who are not Hindus, who usually were Marxists, or were written by Indians who were brown but were Marxists.
We could count endless number of times that the BJP has lost. It has lost major states. What does that show us? It shows that the people of India choose whatever government they want.
Culture in the United States of America is you have arrived when you become white. Indians have become white adjacent. The problem with the Hindu community is every time they are faced with the question of caste, they come up with these tomes of apologia.
I believe India's rise is inherently peaceful, and therefore every attempt will be made to stop India's rise.
India is a union of states. There was no India. There was no continuing civilization. There is no cultural identity. That is the side that has a Stockholm syndrome. Because that is the same side that denies the record of Islamism in India. I'm very specific about my word. It's Islamism.
Sardar Patel himself never claimed to be right-wing. It's something that the left, even in his time, created. I do not consider myself right-wing. I'm a practicing Hindu.
India does not have a right wing is because India celebrates poverty. I am the right winger in this podcast, right?
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to another edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Today my topic is on the war of narratives, because there's been a view that since 2014 when Mr. Modi came to power and then in his second term, there's been a rewriting of history, and this history is with a bias. Whether there is an overhaul of narratives that is taking place, where certain facts were suppressed then, and as a result, have we all grown up with a contrived narrative, and whether this new narrative will create more fissures in our society. I have with me Hindol Sengupta, who's a scholar and a historian. He's written 10 books, including an award-winning book called Being a Hindu. Kushal Mehra hosts the Charvaka podcast on politics, economy, religion, cricket, and all that lies in between. So over to the two gentlemen. So Hindol and Kushal, thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let me begin with Hindol. It's been said that the conservative right-wing narrative did not find space in India since independence, and now there is a churning. Now in the sense of since 2014 or maybe 2016 or 17, even in Lit Fest one hears this, literary festivals one hears this talk all the time that it's only now that historians with a conservative mindset or conservative view of what our history was, they are being heard, their books are being read, they're finding space to air their views, and there's a churning which is happening. Do you agree with that point of view?
I certainly agree, Smita, that there's a churning, but I have a bit of a contrarian point of view, and let me share that with you. I don't believe that there is such a vast right-left divide in our country. There's certainly a left, but the others, so to speak, who are non-left, are not necessarily right. For instance, Sardar Patel himself never claimed to be right-wing. You know, many of the people who are quote-unquote held up today as icons of the so-called right never claimed to be right-wing. Sardar Patel is on record saying that I don't even understand this entire divide. It's something that the left, even in his time, created. Right? I am certainly not right-wing. I have said from every platform possible, I do not consider myself right-wing. I'm a practicing Hindu. And I do the history that I write is true to the education that I received, which is to be honest and factual to the material that I work with, right? Now, I see that there have been distortions made by certain people for certain agendas in the past, and there is a responsibility to correct it. Let me give you one example. Sardar Patel, for instance, was really neglected for a long, long time. You know, it's unforgivable that Ambedkar and Patel had to wait till the 90s to be offered and given the Bharat Ratna. It's unforgivable, right? So therefore, there was a correction required. And that correction, I think, is what's going on now. Now, some people in that correction might consider themselves right-wing. I do not, because as a practicing Hindu, my argument is I cannot be anything but a liberal in the classic sense of the word, not a left liberal. I grew up in communist Calcutta, so I have nothing to do with that ideology. but I am a classic liberal. And I think Hinduism, as a practicing Hindu, teaches us the best values of classic liberalism. All the traditions, whether it's the Gauriya Vaishnavite tradition in Bengal from Sri Chaitanya, or of course Swami Vivekananda's tradition. You take all the traditions of Bengal where I come from. These are classically liberal traditions. So I follow that tradition. Now, I actually have a bone to pick with many of the hardcore conservatives. And I think many of this hardcore conservative sort of beliefs essentially is apologia, as we would say in academic work, for a defense, an insidious defense of caste. And I think that defense of caste is going to be the ruin of India. You can already see in Seattle, this has been tried for a long time, Smita. They've been trying to trigger this, this caste legislation in the US for a long, long time. It was tried in the Bay Area. The people fought back, right? Now it has been...
Seattle, yes.
Now in Seattle, the Pandora's box has been opened. This is essentially a hit at India's prowess in the technology sector in the US. Every company now will be hit with this, and they will have to rethink, okay, should I really hire this person? What if tomorrow there's a case, and so on and so forth. So this underlying quote-unquote conservative caste apology, I am not part of, and therefore I am not part of the right wing. I am part of classic Hindu liberalism. I'm a practicing Hindu. And as a historian, I defend what I see to be right and true.
Interesting. Kushal, let me come to you. What do you have to say about what's happening in Seattle? You're seeing this. In India, we tend to use this left and right terms very loosely. But caste, it's very important, right? These caste wars and typifying it in Seattle the way they have done. What is your view on this?
Well, the legislation, actually, I did read the legislation. I read the amendment. It's not many pages. It was just 2-3 pages. The most fascinating aspect of that legislation was that basically when the areas they cover, they include Africa also. So they mention certain areas that practice, quote unquote, what they called casteism. Coincidentally, it skips all the Western European nations and all of America and Canada and Australia and New Zealand. So basically this was... Once again, if I was to say the white man preaching again to the other plebeians that, hey, look at me, I'm not casteist. Let me reform you, you plebeian, come here to me. So that's what the legislation is. But the problem is not just the legislation. The problem is the defense of the community in the diaspora too. The defense is a mishmash of, I don't know what word, it's like booga, I say, of caste is a Western colonial construct. Okay. Then, one simple question one needs to ask to those people is, even if you look at genetic data for the last 1500 years in this subcontinent, especially in India, then Pakistan, less so in Bangladesh, they have pretty much become non-endogamous. But in India, endogamy is highly prevalent. Other than the Hasidic Jews, we are the people in the world that are highly endogamous. Arthats, we don't marry outside of our groups, jatis, stuff like that. So that's been going on for 1500 years. So who are you going to blame for that then? This is a direct outcome of a certain habit that, now I'm not saying it was like that from day one, but it certainly is not British. Did the British make it more rigid? Yes, because of their census and many other things. But as far as I'm concerned, the caste legislation is a very normal process in any society where they flip the lens from the individual to the group. This is a very common practice. And this is just another... But why are people surprised? There were 2 fascinating books that I read when I used to study over there and live over there in America. One was how the Irish became white, and the other one was how the Jews became white. So apparently there was a time where Irish people were not considered white and the Jews were also not considered white. So the culture in the United States of America is you have arrived when you become white. Indians have become white adjacent. And the
white adjacent?
Yes, white adjacent.
Interesting term, right?
Yeah, Indians have become white adjacent, and especially Hindus in that. So if you are a Muslim...
You mean proximity has made us what? Made Indians what? More liberal and hence illiberal, or what? What is it?
No, I think Fair and Lovely has finally won.
Okay.
So all that Fair and Lovely we put. Finally, the Americans said, "तुमने बहुत अच्छा काम किया, अब तुम white हो गए," kind of a thing.
So, what do you mean in the sense of this white adjacent?
White adjacent means that you are privileged because you have too much money. Because if you look at data in America, you have the highest amount of money literally parked with Indians, and not just Indians. Let's get real, Hindus. Even amongst the Indian community, if you break the within the community per capita income, per family income down, you will see the Hindus are richer than the Muslim Indians, the Sikh Indians. These are just the thing is, in those countries, these statistics are available. In our country, we hide everything. It's like, किसी को बता नहीं देना. But over there, it's quite clear. They realize that, and the ideology over there is like the same thing is the same parallel is now happening with the Jewish community too. They are also no longer considered in a major section of left-wing politics over there as oppressed, in spite of the horrors that community has gone through in a very recent past of humanity. So the same thing is happening to the Hindu community. The problem with the Hindu community is every time they are faced with the question of caste, they come up with these tomes of apologia. That and by the way, just to add to Hindol, the apologia doesn't stem in India. This is a very unique phenomenon where the Indians in India have learned the apologia of caste from North American Indians and Hindus. So it basically comes from there over here, and then we start giving the apologia for that. No, it is this, it is that. But as far as I'm concerned, for that society, so I used to be an entrepreneur, so I'll give you an entrepreneurial example of what exactly are they doing. So I call this sophisticated firoti ka paisa.
Okay.
So when I used to run my factory, this is, if you go in Navi Mumbai is much better now, but even today, if you go further away from Navi Mumbai, let's say in Badlapur, in Dombivli, in these areas, industrial areas, Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation. So there are fixed rackets. So you can only buy brick from someone. You can only buy, coarse aggregate, जिसको हम खड़ी बोलते हैं हिंदी में, coarse aggregate, fine aggregate from certain people. Then there will be that local gunda who will come to your factory and say in Hindi, Sahab, ये आदमी को रखो. And then you'll be like, why should I keep it? Now then, if you don't keep that person, he will do things. So how do you deal with it? Acha, I'm not going to keep that person, but what do you want so that you don't trouble me? And then you give some money. Now you change that scenario, you get into the United States of America. The United States of America ka person who comes to your door and says, Sahab, mujhko paisa do, is the diversity, equity, inclusion ka firoti racket. So everybody goes around, says, you are oppressor, you are oppressor, you are oppressor. How did you decide I am an oppressor? Well, we have this epistemology according to which if you have money, you are cancelled. If you are not of certain religious identity, you are cancelled. Now, unfortunately, for the Hindu community, they are not in the religious category, nor in the monetary bracket, ki ke bhai hum gareeb hain, kind of a thing, and you're too educated. And then, but still, the Indians were brown. So there the problem was arising, ki yaar, how do I fix the brown problem? So then the great geniuses that lived in India, they said, hey, there's something called caste. You can hit them on the caste issue. Now, these are facts that a gigantic majority of the diaspora is what we would call general category in India. We cannot deny this fact. But, for example, all of us have family over there. All of us have family that has children who are born over there. Can you name one child who has any caste consciousness over there? Who's born over there and raised over there?
That itself is privilege, isn't it? The fact that you don't, that the caste factor doesn't hit you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, sir. See, this is a very complex issue, what caste used to be at a particular time. We have to go back into history for this,
sure.
Right? What kind of, so it's a question of caste is essentially at its very core a question of mobility. How mobile is the system? Kapil Kapoor, who I used to interact very closely with, once said that people assume that when Manu spoke about the Brahmins being the head and the Shudras being the feet, that that person, that Purusha, was standing up. What if they were lying down? What he was trying to say is that if the Purusha is lying down, then everybody is on the same level,
sure, okay.
Right? Now,
there is never that level playing field.
There isn't, and yet,
but you were talking about that America would give that level playing field, or Western democracies would,
and perhaps India also did at one point.
Okay.
Perhaps at one point it did, which is why, remember, our two great epics are not written by Brahmins, right? So if it was so privileged, then how is it that our two greatest epics neither are written by Brahmins.
Yeah.
So these are questions to ask. The word caste, of course, comes from Portuguese, as we all know. It comes from casta. So there has been a lot of work in the last 2 decades that has been done on where does the rigidity of caste come from. So there have been people like Prakash Shah and others in the UK who have looked at the statistical data and said, well, when the British began to enumerate these things and, document them, they looked at these things as fixed groups. Perhaps they were not fixed. There was far greater mobility between the groups. There were, it was certainly Vivekananda believed that there was far greater mobility, and it is essentially your guna, your abilities, your merits that made you, that gave you that mobility, right? And certainly these issues, when they became rigid, is a question that we are still not entirely clear. There is still a debate about this. However, there is certainly this fact that in the next 10 years, as India tries to go from $3 to $5 trillion, it'll be hit by a bunch of things. My point is this, Smita. We always discuss these things as esoteric debates within our society.
True.
They are not. They are geopolitical issues. They are issues through which India's rise will be contained, or there's an attempt to contain India's rise. So what can you hit India with? Caste. Caste is one major thing you can hit India with. If you can break the back of Indians in the Silicon Valley, that'll be really a powerful weapon. You can see already the divisions are coming up again in Punjab.
Yeah.
Already, there's a simmering of the Khalistani movement again. In places like Australia, many of us were astonished to see that this has now reached Australia. It was always there in England
The
and
attack
Canada.
on temples there.
Indeed, attack on temples, the coming together, the referendum happening in Australia.
Yeah.
So all of these things are if you really take a step back and think about it, who in the world, the powers that be today, wants another billion-strong country to grow at 6-7% and hit $1 trillion mark? Because once you hit $1 trillion, that's it. There you've cleared. Then your rise is impossible to stop. And then you cannot not take that country with importance. Nobody wants another country like that because the fear is it'll become another China.
Yeah, status quo helps many people.
Of course,
or
and the
most
fear
countries,
is
most powerful countries.
Absolutely. And they would much rather want a South Korea where you're prosperous, economically prosperous, but you entirely toe their line on every other subject. So people want another Australia or a South Korea. They do not want another China. Now, I'm not suggesting that India will become another China, not at all. I believe India's rise is inherently peaceful and India will create a different model for itself. But that's the fear, and therefore every attempt will be made to stop India's rise. And I think we should look at things like caste, the Khalistan movement, all kinds of other things, the fissures in our society, through the lenses of India's geopolitical rise.
Yeah.
To continue on what Hindol was saying about, status quo working for these so-called liberal democracies, progressive democracies, rich democracies, it doesn't gel well that India would be, a prosperous nation or a middle income also. India में भी यही problem है ना. So when there are people who say that we should aspire to be vishwaguru, the others say that, listen, first you're not even there. You're not even got economic prosperity or even a standard of living which is to be appreciated that हाँ अच्छा रोटी कपड़ा मकान सड़क बिजली पानी है. So जब तक वो नहीं है, what nonsense are you talking about vishwaguru in any concept? So tell me about this parallel views which are running.
Well, every society has its romanticists, romantics. Every society has its supremacists. So the Vishwaguru syndrome is something that I personally mock a lot. I was like, Vishwaguru of what? Vishwaguru of mediocrity as of now. What are we going to be a Vishwaguru at? But I don't mock the aspirational aspect of it. You should aspire to be a Vishwaguru. You should aspire to be a universalist. You should aspire to make sure your value system, because I personally believe, I think value systems that have come, especially in the moral ethical range from India, are actually superior to the Western Greco-Roman moral ethical range. But my background is in philosophy, so I'm just giving that point of view. But just to add on that privilege bit, I actually disagree on this privilege point. Okay, should you acknowledge privilege? Yes. अभी उसके बाद वो जैसे वो तब मैं क्या करूँ, जान ले लूँ अपनी, मैं तो अभी क्या करूँ मैं, तो मतलब अभी रोज अभी एक चप्पल लूँ अपने सर पे मारूँ.
पर क्यों नहीं होता? You know why? Because we for generations have glorified about poverty and about not having. हाँ, कि हम लोग इतने गरीब परिवार से, आज भी देखो ना, आर लीडर्स टॉक लाइक दैट ओनली ना, दैट मेरे पास 2 वक्त की रोटी नहीं थी. सो ओके, वेरी गुड, अप्रिशिएट इट, फैब्युलस दैट यू हैव रीच्ड वेयर यू हैव, you came from nowhere. But there are others also. So it gives you, I saw this Trevor Noah's thing, you know, where he himself says being deprived is not it's something that these Western democracies, or when you reach that level of affluence, you look back and say, हाँ देखो, but you don't ever want to be there. So why do you want to keep on glorifying that part?
Yeah, because that's the only way you feel good and not feel guilty at a cognitive level. This is something everybody does. In fact, it's very funny. I was meeting a bunch of kids yesterday, and I told them, I was like, never apologize for being born in a middle class family. Never apologize for that. A child born in North America should not apologize being born in a so-called upper caste house, because that child did not choose that. First of all, you did not select being born in that house. That it's not like agreement sign की थी किधर पैदा होने के पहले कि कहाँ पैदा होना भाई, वो तो बेचारा पैदा हो गया, अभी वो बच्चे का क्या दोष है. You can acknowledge it, you can be sympathetic to other people's plight, you can maybe participate in the process of those people getting out of it, but not apologize for it. I'm never going to be apologetic about that. And this entire culture stems from fetishization, and the West is a past master at that. The West mindset, यार इनको इंडिया में आके स्लमडॉग मिलियनेयर ही बनाना होता है, और तो कुछ बना नहीं पाते हैं, ये वही बनाते हैं. ये पावर्टी पॉन है, और क्या है. दिस इज पावर्टी पॉन, एंड दिस इज अ वेरी ओल्ड वे ऑफ दीज पीपल. इनफैक्ट आई यूज्ड टू नोटिस दिस इन वेस्टर्न डिस्कोर्स. एवरी टाइम अ वेस्टर्नर, you show them something and they have to feel good about themselves, they will always point the camera to some country which they call third world, and then they show rubbish in that country, and they're like, हाँ हम इनसे तो अच्छे हैं ना.
वो खाली बर्तन shot.
Yeah, so I mean,
we shouldn't say this in front of Hindol, because the criticism also is that Satyajit Ray's films did a lot of that. So the North Indian concept is, ये बंगाली जब फिल्म बनाते हैं इनको अवार्ड मिलता है, और ये खाली बर्तन ही दिखाते हैं सारा टाइम.
I mean, that's an entirely different conversation.
Debate, yes.
But having said that, of course, Ray never, Ray was never
he
showing
didn't.
poverty.
No, he did.
If you know what I mean,
Yes,
right?
yes, of course. It's like the same thing that I'm being facetious, of
Yeah,
course.
no,
So
no.
YouTube में
We
please
just-
hate मत भेजना मेरे को. It's not as if I'm saying Shyam Benegal, Satyajit Ray, सब ये poverty porn दिखाते थे. But the point is, what Kushal was making is that the fallback mechanism of the West used to be that. But
Quite
then
right.
what is your problem अगर हम विश्वगुरु के लिए कोई बोलता है कि विश्वगुरु बनना है?
मगर किस में विश्वगुरु से, यही तो मुझे खींच मचती है इन चीज़ों से. किस में विश्वगुरु हो, मतलब पहले
बनना है.
बनना ठीक है, मगर बनना नहीं है. मेरी प्रॉब्लम है जो लोग कहते हैं कि जो विश्वगुरु हैं वो कह रहे हैं. मतलब 2014 में ये तो गवर्नमेंट के आंकड़े हैं कि आधा देश रास्ते में हग रहा था. और पहले हगना तो बंद कर दो रास्ते में, फिर विश्वगुरु बनने की बात करो.
तो that's
नहीं,
what
but
Modi
मेरा
did
एक,
ना.
I have a...
He built the toilets, no?
So I
no.
appreciated it.
Ah, okay.
No, so I have a... So, look, we are 1.4 billion now, right? If you think about a time when all of the problems, even at the baseline, will be solved, it will not happen in our
True,
lifetime.
yeah.
Right? We can't wait for that. It's like people used to say, oh, why do we want mobile phones? Raste to pehle bana lo.
Yeah, this was said about Ambani when he said that I want everybody to have a mobile phone. If you
In our
remember,
lifetime,
in our lifetime,
in our
yes.
lifetime, we've heard this. कि रास्ते तो बन नहीं पाए आपके, लोगों को तो खाना नहीं मिल रहा,
पानी नहीं
मोबाइल
मिल
फोन
रहा.
की मोबाइल फोन की बात.
People are still walking to fetch water.
And-
What are you giving mobile phone for?
And this is in politics. If you remember, Mr.
Sure.
Chidambaram said in Parliament, what are you talking about UPI? अरे farmer बैठ के ऐसे थोड़ी मोबाइल पे पैसा मिल जाएगा. What rubbish
Yeah.
you're teaching us. So I think technology is enabling us to leapfrog certain
True.
things.
Yeah.
If you look at our vaccination program today there's no doubt, right?
Yeah.
India's homegrown vaccines have done much better. Now there's a Stanford report on it.
Yeah.
How many millions of lives Indians vaccines have saved. They have done much better than the Pfizer vaccine, for instance. You will remember what a pressure there was from certain Indian liberal elite quarters to say that India must get that Pfizer. क्यों नहीं आ रहा है Pfizer vaccine हमारे पास?
Yeah.
अभी लाओ, आज लाओ, कल लाओ, whatever.
The
right?
Bollywood celebrities and writers,
You know,
were
and
like,
people were holding up
मुझे
placards.
Pfizer दो.
You know, as if they were asking for God, right?
Yeah.
And yet, that would have been a disastrous decision. So, Ashley Tellis recently said in an interview that one of the most curious things about the Indian elite is this. You ask the elite of any country, given the circumstances, if possible, they would want their country to attain great power status. It is only strangely within the Indian elite that they don't want their country, or many of them don't want their country to attain great power status. This is a very strange thing.
Isn't it something Ramachandra Guha had said in a speech once, that India not only should not try and it should not aspire, it should actually make sure it never becomes one.
Yeah, Ashley Tellis and Mr. Jaishankar worked together in the 1-2-3
course,
deal.
of course.
And I was trying to bring him to speak on this, about this whole thing about Indian elite. Kushal, Rajiv Gandhi, when he became Prime Minister and he was talking about computers, us time bhi aise hi hua tha, that what? Computers, India, and he was pilloried so much for just this thing that, have you seen where our status is? Hum log kahan bana sakte hain computers? Who will use computers? And then there used to be cartoons of him, computer boy. So, I understand this Vishwaguru sounds a little pompous on our part when we still have so much that we have to rectify in our country. But wanting to be there is something we should be.
I have
you
no
don't have a
issues
bone
with
to
wanting
pick.
to be. My issue is always, my issue is with the people and the false supremacists who, it is very annoying to hear from people, and this is not koi average onga ponga uncle whom you meet over dinner or breakfast. There are many politicians and semi-political class people who come on a microphone and say, हमारे पास तो सारे आंसर थे. अच्छा, सारे आंसर थे आपके पास, तो फिर ये क्या करके बैठ गए हो अगर सारे आंसर थे? और फिर अगर इफ यू काउंटर क्वेश्चन दैट, देयर लाइक, प्रॉब्लम क्या है इस देश में? सो which is why, to the beginning point, India does not have a right wing is because India celebrates poverty. And the celebration of poverty is not just a communist thing. The celebration of poverty is a pan-Indian political spectrum thing. I've never hidden my voting patterns, never, ever. Everybody who knows me knows who I vote for. But including the political outfit I vote for, the celebration of poverty and this false simplicity that, oh, सादगी में रहना चाहिए, उसको नहीं रहना, उसको पहनना है अच्छा कोट, तेरे पैसे थोड़ी ना ले रहा है.
Do you remember Soot Poot ki Sarkar? How it impacted? How dare you wear a suit?
अगर वही तो
You are
प्रॉब्लम
a
हो गया
chai
ना.
wala, how dare you wear a suit?
तो zeitgeist में था ना, and the prime minister had to change course.
I think it began in India at some point. There were many people of my parents' generation, our parents' generation, grandparents' generation, where the ostentatious display of wealth was considered
Vulgar.
not kosher and vulgar. I
Yeah.
think there is a point there. There is definitely a point there. That we have taken it to the other extreme to suggest that why should we ask for mobile phones is ridiculous.
Okay.
However, having said that, and considering we live in Delhi of all places,
Conspicuous consumption is the biggest thing in
we
the city.
should at some point, consider that perhaps there was a little bit of a point that, a little bit of considerate, consumption
But
perhaps.
Hindu, there's no middle path in us. We live in Delhi, conspicuous consumption बहुत है, तो हमारे सारे parliamentarians सादगी में आएंगे, they will dress in khadi, they will wear kolhapuri chappal and all, but बेटी की शादी will be in Udaipur Palace, Sabyasachi, Manish Malhotra spend crores in that and then come back and wear that sadgi. That
घर
poor
में painting
Annamalai's
कितनी महंगी
watch,
होती है.
he got trolled because he was wearing a Rafale watch. So he said, how can you afford a Rafale watch? You're nothing.
And in Tamil Nadu, the wealth that's there in Tamil Nadu, it's insane.
So tell me this, even in the liberal democracies, we seeing in the, when I say liberal, I obviously mean Western democracies, there's this view that liberalism is under threat because of rise of nationalism. Do you see that?
No, not at all. Look, nationalism is completely misunderstood. I have long argued that post-colonial nations cannot look at nationalism the way the West looks at nationalism. It's not possible. We have a different lived experience. We cannot negate that. Today, George Soros thinks of nationalism from the prism of what he saw as a 14-year-old living under
Hungary.
Nazi-occupied Hungary. That's his prism. He then saw the Soviet Union, the oppression, and so on and so forth. That's his lens. We cannot see nationalism like that, because without nationalism, we would have never become independent. It makes no sense. So post-colonial nations can never look at nationalism the way the West looks at nationalism. We cannot look at nationalism and feel frightened. We look at nationalism and feel hope, because our entire existence comes from the fact that we were nationalists, right? So, and even our growth, look, in order for a transition to happen even to a middle income country and then to a great power, it requires a national ambition and a national consensus. Building that national consensus that we are getting there and we will get there requires a generous dose of positive nationalism. Now, all of this cannot be eradicated from post-colonial countries. If you eradicate that, then it's, the fissures of those countries will break them apart. And perhaps that's what many of our detractors want. It's long argued, and even today it's argued, India is not a nation. It is it is a coming together of states. It's a union of states. That is a fundamental, it's a very dangerous argument. That to argue India is not a nation is a very dangerous argument, because it completely decries 5,000 years of civilization. You're essentially saying that India had a long civilization and civilizational unity, that India had a culture that transcended to every part of its geography, that extensive work has been done showcasing the sacredness, the sacred unity of that geography. All of it means nothing. Only 1947 counts. This is a very dangerous argument. This is an argument for the Balkanization of India. And mark my words, people who make this argument are triggering fissures in this country, which will, God forbid, lead to trouble in the future.
Do you agree with that, Kushal?
Yes, Indian discourse is, in my view, in largely two camps. One camp of Indian discourse has a Stockholm syndrome. And one camp of the Indian discourse has a post-traumatic stress disorder. That's, by and large, our Indian discourse. The reason this discourse has become so vicious and so hard is because on one side, which is the side that Hindol talks about, which says India is a union of states, there was no India, there was no continuing civilization, there is no cultural identity, and that is the side that has a Stockholm syndrome. Because that is the same side that denies the record of Islamism in India. I'm very specific about my word. It's Islamism in India.
Why do you say that?
Because it is the political usage of a certain ideology and its superimposition. And वो यहाँ के डांडिया नहीं खेल रहे थे हमारे साथ जब वो आए. उन्होंने कुछ चीजें की हैं. और अच्छा मजे की बात है कि
they didn't come to steal, they didn't come to, that's also a thing.
Yeah.
They didn't come to steal wealth.
ऐसे हाथ पकड़ के हमारे साथ डांस तो नहीं कर रहे थे वो. उन्होंने अपनी की. अच्छा मजे की बात है कि if you have this discussion with the Stockholm syndrome side, so वो बोलेंगे कि बताओ किधर है. मतलब उसकी किताब है, उसी ने लिखा हुआ है. चाचनामा हो गया, बाबरनामा हो गया, बहुत सारे हो गए. तो नहीं, वो तो invaders जो होते हैं, they tend to exaggerate their claims. It's like, wait, what? Okay, let us assume they exaggerated the claim. Okay, can you give me a scientific answer of, can you calculate the exaggerated percentage? So the दो तो करे ना उसने, दो तो करे. नहीं वो दो भी नहीं है. So you don't understand. And then it is the other side, the post-traumatic stress disorder side. The post-traumatic stress disorder side is still stuck at a stage, and Hindol and a few others are the exception but not the norm, and I say this with all seriousness. That is in a 24 घंटे का रुदाली फेज. उनको रोने से प्यार हो गया है. वो रोना बहुत पसंद करते हैं. वो इतना रोते हैं क्योंकि उनको लगता है रोने से अटेंशन मिल रही है. अभी रोते रहोगे मगर सच तो बताओ. सच बताने वाले कितने हैं यहाँ पे? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, हिंडोल ने किताबें लिखी, ठीक है,
Yeah.
पढ़ो. विक्रम संपत ने किताब लिखी, पढ़ो, संजीव सन्याल ने किताब लिखी, पढ़ो, पढ़ना है नहीं, हमने पूरा टाइम रोना है. सो जब एक साइड रो रही है और दूसरा साइड आपके रोने के कारण को डिनाई कर रही है, डिस्कोर्स कैसे होगा इस देश में? अगर आप आज छोटी छोटी चीज़ें होती हैं, जब मेरे साथ कोई बात करता है, आई से इंडिया, सो द इम्पोजिशन इज यू आर मेकिंग इंडिया है हिंदू राष्ट्र. माई आंसर इज नॉट अपॉलोजेटिक. माई आंसर इज, I think you mean you are making India a Hindu Rajya. India is already a Hindu Rashtra. Our chitti, our essence is what we loosely call. And when I mean Hindu, I include Bulle Shah in it too. I don't exclude Bulle
Various
Shah.
kinds, yeah, including atheism, which which you talk about in your podcast. You talk about so much about
So that's the whole
that
point,
too.
right?
That's also part of Hinduism. People don't understand
And they
it.
deny that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
They deny that. I've been mocked by Western atheists.
Yeah, your podcast, I've seen that, in which the very name itself.
Yeah, Charvak.
चारवाक. So उसको भी ट्रोल इसलिए होता है कि how can you speak about Hinduism because you and then you say थोड़ा पढ़ लो ना.
But these are old battles, the who has the, there are,
Who has the control over narrative?
Who has the control over, and who can speak for Hinduism?
Right.
That's another question.
Correct.
But this battle has
And you've
been
written
going
a
on.
book on this.
Yeah, no, and even
One of the most, I think, well-read books of yours.
and in spite of how the book did and the awards it won and whatever, there's still people who will say, oh, but you don't have adhikar or something. My friend Sanjeev Sanyal says whenever people get bored, they come to Twitter and start spelling things with capital letters in between of words. So then they say we have
double
adhikar.
AR, adhikar.
So and there's a whole, yeah. But I want to put another thing to you. See,
Right.
this debate on what happened with Islam in India, what happened with conversions, all of this should come out, right? I have no doubt that all of this should come out. All the conflicts and so on and so forth. However, if we focus, if the main point of our national discourse is to find out these conflicts, it's been 8 years of Narendra Modi's government, right? A lot has come out. And we are now, I think, at a far more healthier state of discourse. It's not so skewed like it used to be before. I think the Prime Minister had asked for a 10-year...
Before bole to?
Before 2014. Let me tell you a story.
So now you are saying it is skewed, but if you hear the
Yeah, they will say it's
the
not.
center left and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
left,
they will say it not.
When I'm saying center left and left, I mean the Marxist ideology people who had a control over the narrative.
So I'll tell you the story. Let me give you on your podcast. Let me tell you the story. Do you know, people talk about being Hindu. You also mentioned the book. Do you know what trouble I had to go through to publish that book? Let me tell you the story. I had already written 4-5 books before I published Being Hindu. My publisher, I changed publishers with Being Hindu. My publisher at that time, who used to be my publisher, refused to publish it. My agent in America then went to every other Indian publisher. No one agreed to publish it, only for the fact that it had Being Hindu. They said, why can't it be called Being Indian? All kinds of things, right? Then, and people should know the story. What happened after that? My agent happened to meet Shobha De in the Jaipur Literature Festival and told her that, look, this is a great book. It's, written by this guy. She said, I will publish it under my own imprint. When word got around that Shobha De was going to publish it and push it, that's when suddenly interest gathered again and the book got published. But the story doesn't end there, Smita. Do you know, after the success of Being Hindu, after Being Hindu became the first book on Hinduism to win the Wilbur Award in America, after that, when I wanted to publish the Sardar Patel book, there were editors who called up different publishers to say, this book should never be published. We shouldn't publish a book on Patel at the moment because it will support some political ideology. So I had to fight. I cannot tell you how much I had to fight to publish each book of mine.
It's like the same thing about Veer Savarkar, no?
Of course.
It's the same way that, anybody who wanted to write about Savarkar, because of the different views about Savarkar, what he was before cellular jail, post-cellular jail, the connection with Godse and the others, so the whole thing that, several generations of Indians grew up thinking Veer Savarkar villain. But from a certain section of India, they grew up thinking, no, he was not a villain. He had various shades to it. So why not read the various shades to it till Vikram's book came out? Vikram
I agree.
Sampath's book. So Kushal, tell me, since you have this podcast which does well, what is the interaction that people have, when they come back? Do you see a pushback to this new narratives which are coming out about our historical, about history? Being the new authors who are coming back, do they say, nahi, ye to confuse kar rahe hain. Fissures which existed, which were closed, now these guys are opening up these fissures. Nahi hona chahiye.
So it's very interesting. So I know a lot of lefties listen to my podcast. So it's very funny. Everybody is almost left wing in India, but it is like leftists, and then there are leftists who the leftists don't want to eat dinner with. So it's like that. Our political discourse is pretty much like that.
Academia especially, I think. And journalism.
So I have, and I know this for a fact, naam nahi lunga, tum jante ho tum kaun ho. So they'll message me privately, "Arey, nice podcast yaar." I was like, share karna. नहीं यार, क्यों? अरे नहीं, मेरा ये बोल देगा, वो बोल देगा. It exists. My point is that the reason they resist to pick up, because this is the resistance to his book is the answer to what you have asked. Why do they resist books like this? Just look at how the vicious attacks that have happened on Vikram Sampath.
Yeah.
The viciousness. They will never pick up the book, read it, and counter it. They don't do that. They will always counter the quack on Twitter that makes outlandish claims, which is what I was saying when it was about the Vishwagurus. You cannot deal with this scenario in any balanced way. All you can do as a content creator that I do is you just go on doing what you're doing, and it's not like I don't call left-wing people.
Yeah.
They don't come. There is no stopping me. I am an independent guy. Nobody tells me whom to talk to. Nobody comes. Now some come because they think, अरे इसका तो थोड़ा नाम हो गया, अभी इसको avoid नहीं कर सकते. But the point is, most of them still will not come when I may be more liberal on social issues than most of the left-wingers are. But this is a classic case on, as far as the feedback is concerned, private feedback means zero to me. So my, by and large, feedback is usually positive, or there are two sides that always are mad at me. The ultra casteist side, that is always eternally
I've
mad.
seen, there are some who collate this overtly religious symbolism, tradition, conventions, dharmic, rituals with nationalism, right-wing history, narration. उस सब का एक collation हो जाता है. So if you don't do it, like, maybe you don't fast during the Navratris. So then you become, you're anti-Hindu. You're not practicing religious. ऐसे होता है आपके साथ?
मेरे साथ, I mean, the funny
Because
bit
of
is,
the, एक तो
I
नाम
am a
also.
vegetarian during Navratri.
Okay.
Because I just keep the tradition on. I don't believe in the divine aspect of it, but it's just something I do as a Punjabi, right? It's Punjabi culture, so we are vegetarians for 9 days.
See, this is what Hindol. There's a culture, there's a tradition, there is overt religious aspect.
Yeah, I do face this. So they will say things like, there are, very rarely, I mean, look, I have received nothing but love from most people. But the pushback will be, it's like, how can somebody come and tell me, "Arey, tu to nastik hai," and consider me to be offended by it? This is like going to someone and saying, "Arey, teri do aankhein hain." अरे मैं तो हूँ ही ना, मेरे को ऑफेंस कैसे होगा? This is like me going and saying, अरे तू मूर्ति पूजा क्या? अरे तो हूँ ना, तो क्या?
No, what has happened is, you see, a lot of these conversations, they were at a private domain. Before social media came into being, nobody had any occasion or space also to show that, oh, look, I am doing Karwa Chauth. Whether to prove a point or to disprove a point.
True,
right?
yes.
With social media, it has become a point. Now, the moment it becomes a point to prove or to disprove, There's another faction who will attack or support.
Yeah.
So all of these things, we grew up, and I think all of us grew up with, there was a certain public conversation about faith or religion, but most of the private practices were private. It's something you did. Your mother did certain, like he's saying, हमारे घर पे, Punjabis do this, so we also do
मैं तो
it.
दिवाली की पूजा खुद करता हूँ.
But this primacy of religion in public discourse.
And I think this
About
is...
that.
So again, I actually think that is not a good sign, in my opinion, because I feel we are such a diverse country. And if we really need to fulfill our manifest destiny, so to speak, if we really want to be Vishwaguru, we need to now focus, especially in the next 10, 15 years, on what makes us one, what brings us together rather than what sets us apart. Because if we focus at a day-to-day basis, like you were saying, Diwali mein, okay, now this campaign will be done ki ye ad to bahut bura hai, or something ki ye to something.
Yeah.
This makes... I have had people who are, really devout Shaktas, Shakti worshippers, say, people have come up to them and say, but in Diwali, and they're like, well, I didn't feel like doing this. I did Kali Puja instead, whatever. If we get into all of this, and not just in Hinduism, in all faiths of the country, if we get into more and more deeper into every day pointing out what separates us, there will be a problem. There will be a problem. No country in the world has ever risen with incessant focus on what divides people.
Yeah.
We must have a national consensus and conversation about what brings us together.
But if I was to, play the devil's
Sure.
advocate out here, this is exactly what the left-wingers say. That, this whole thing about the new narrative, about that everything about the old narrative was bad. The reason was because history writing was part of building the nation, that nationhood feeling post-independence, to put band-aid over all our fissures. So hence the what Kushal was mentioning, wo aaye the, they broke our idols, they broke this, they looted.
It was hidden.
Let's
Right.
not talk about that. Let's concentrate on the good part of even the
Bad portion, so to speak. Yeah.
bad portions.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So now if you're going
And
to
am
be
I saying the same
writing,
thing? Yeah.
you're going to be opening up those fissures again.
course.
Those wounds, those ghaves are going to come up all over again.
Of
So
course.
then,
So my point is that, look, we have already had nearly a decade of opening whatever needed to be opened, right? We are reaching a decade of a correction, a very much needed correction. A really important correction has already been achieved over a decade, not 6 months, not 1 year, but a full decade has gone in this. And more will be done. My only point is, if we continue, especially on social media, because you see, to be honest with you, how many people are, some people are reading the books, I'm very happy. But in real terms, 1.4 billion, how many are really reading, going back and reading the books and going into the depth?
True.
Especially on social media, if we continue this relentless campaign to focus on, and not just books, I'm not even talking just about books. Look at attacks on different communities. Smita, we are a 1.4 billion strong country. People are fighting with each other and killing with each other in every part of the country, every day, something.
Yeah.
If every day we point out 5 incidents and say, look, these are between these communities, this is between... Now, some of them may be true and it's a localized thing. We have forgotten how to tackle things at a localized level.
Yeah.
Everything becomes a national issue.
True.
It doesn't... Okay, maybe something happened there. Maybe it caused a lot of turmoil also. It's a localized issue. It doesn't have to become a national issue.
Yeah, it's like, Kushal, since you use social media a hell of a lot, it's like one celebrity Hindu-Muslim marriage is seen as a beacon ke kuch hota hi nahi hai. And if you just go to the registrar's office, you will see hundreds in every city, every day.
Yeah,
I'm not saying hundreds, kabhi, hundreds of these marriages which are happening, of inter-religious marriages. But then one celebrity marriage is seen as, in this era of aftabs and this and that, ek dekho ho gaya.
बहुत हाँ.
Or one lynching incident might happen and that colors your entire past, your entire present.
और वो सब में आ जाएगा, मतलब कि कोई उस हफ्ते अगर कोई फॉरेन मिनिस्टर विजिट कर रहा है उसमें भी किसी ने बोल दिया, मतलब कुछ भी.
वो तो देखो,
तो everything is social media driven now.
So social media driven basically. आपको पता नहीं, you guys remember ना, वो वेगस की स्लॉट मशीन होती थी, ऐसे होती है ना. There is a reason for that.
Crap machine or whatever it's called.
So if when you move that hand like this, it creates a dopamine rush.
Yeah.
So because
Sorry, when you do like this, no, in our country, at least my generation, I don't know you, वो flush का
हाँ वो तो
chain वाला flush होता है ना,
वो तो ट्रेन में भी होती है.
ट्रेन का चेन होता था. So don't do that movement.
नहीं, मगर वेगस की स्लॉट मशीन में literally you go right ना. So why is the mobile phone refresh button also like this? It's literally the same
कुशल, हमें
technology.
कितनी सादगी है, हम क्या सोच रहे हो, तुम वेगस के बारे में सोच रहे हो. This shows तुम कितने अल्ट्रा कैपिटलिस्ट हो.
मैं तो हूँ. So for the record,
मध्यम वर्गीय है.
I am the right winger. I am the right winger in this podcast, right? I
stated right winger.
Stated right winger. मैं तो हूँ, मुझे तो शर्म भी नहीं आती, मगर just to
शर्म भी नहीं आती. Now look, Hindol, how he has to qualify that by saying it.
Yes.
शर्म भी नहीं आती.
You know, we have become a country of people wanting to poke each other at every instance. मतलब चैन से कोई कुछ कर ही नहीं सकता.
तो ऐसे थोड़ी ना होता था, सोशल मीडिया में ट्रोल नहीं करूंगा तो
So
मजा
which is
कैसे
why
आएगा?
I have figured कि don't put anything of your personal life in any way, some people you're meeting or whatever on social media, because somebody will point some fault with it. अच्छा तुमने ग्रीन कलर पे प्लेट पे खाया, बस उसको लेके प्रॉब्लम.
Suddenly, no, green has become Islam, or saffron has become Hindu. Biryani has become Muslim and pulao has become Hindu. तो हर चीज को ऐसे करेंगे. I'm just very grateful that idli has not changed.
No, and you know the thing is, green in Bengal was always about the green fields of Bengal. You know,
green हिंदू में green
Of
नहीं है
course.
क्या? इस्लाम में भी green है, हिंदू में भी.
So it's
Anyway,
everything.
we're getting
But- yeah, but
diverted
to-
about
no, I
this.
want to make this one point about Pathan. I saw the film. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whatever that orange colored bikini was there for literally like
I know.
I swear to you, it was there for like less than a minute.
Yeah.
I cannot believe
आंखें जल
there
गई
was
ना
this-
लोगों की एक मिनट के लिए, मगर
मतलब I cannot believe कि इतना मतलब क्या
बेशरम
तमाशा
रंग
हुआ.
था यार. Don't you understand, Hindol? that the song was बेशरम रंग.
पर बहुत सारे रंग थे उसमें.
Yeah, so how many people would have gone to see that one song and realized that that's such a small part of the film?
It was so mad. It's so unnecessary.
इसके लिए ना
हाँ.
मैं इससे इंस्पायर होके शेमलेसली मैं बता रहा हूँ, मैंने एक टी शर्ट बनाई थी आउटरेज की दुकान की. एक दुकान है उसमें आउटरेज बिक रही है और हर आदमी जाके आउटरेज. इट्स रिक्रिएशनल आउटरेज. ट्राई एंड
Yeah, it is. That's a very good phrase. I like that.
Yeah.
It's not my phrase, it's Joe Rogan's phrase. He says it's recreational outrage, but
And it sells.
it sells. Look, everybody is doing it. It
Yeah.
is a dopamine rush. Everybody is hooked on to negativity. 2-3 points on whether, look, there is no reconciliation without the truth.
Yeah,
The key
I
aspect
agree.
of truth and reconciliation, I just want to
Which we
answer-
never had in India.
Yeah, so we
South Africa had it,
So,
we didn't.
So this is where I slightly disagree with Hindol. नहीं, अभी तक कुछ नहीं हुआ. We have barely scratched the surface of peeling the layers of the onion that are the truth about India. Look, so for example, yesterday day before yesterday, I was with a population geneticist and a linguist, right? Just discussing the Aryan invasion theory. Tell me, all my friends in America who are like serious scholars, they tell me privately, why the hell are Indians so emotional about Aryan invasion? It is just a thing that is peddled. It is a hypothesis. I was like, do you realize that in India there are major political outfits that use this pseudo theory and peddle it like nonsense, and then you tell me as an Indian that I should not be emotional about it. Second point I want to make, that it is not fair to say that there will be no spillover of your country's religious civilizational identity on your laws. For example, in 1950s, the American dollar bill said, "In God we trust." I want to be very open. वो भगवान श्री राम है? नहीं है. सबको पता है वो भगवान कौन सा है. उनको शर्म आज तक नहीं आती है. हमको शर्म नहीं आनी चाहिए कुछ इश्यूज में. The debate should
तो
be.
है ना, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में है. Our thing has it.
नहीं, मगर
sketch on top of the
Yeah,
constitution. is from
वही है.
Bhagavad
नहीं,
Gita.
मगर अभी क्या होता है कि वो हमारी कौन सी एयरक्राफ्ट थी, HAL,
हाँ, वो हनुमान
ठीक है?
का, हाँ.
हमको क्यों शर्म आनी चाहिए इन चीजों में? और इमेजिन करो, हमें तो लोग बोलेंगे ये नास्तिक को क्यों हनुमान के स्टिकर के लिए बोलने की
वो भी
जरूरत
there
पड़
was
रही?
so much confusion that sticker came on, sticker came
Came
off,
off.
sticker came on.
See, social media breeds third ratedness in a major way, but I overall think it's still, look, where did I get to meet Hindol, for example?
It's true. We have all
yeah.
actually met each other.
So how have we met?
via social
So,
media?
when
It's true.
Problem ये है कि people only remember the negative aspects, and yes, there is a lot of negative. Ask me, मुझे रोज गालियाँ पड़ती है, मैं तो
Yeah.
कितनी गालियाँ खाता हूँ.
हाँ.
तो but the discourse is always going to be like this now. The discourse is always going to go from one recreational outrage to the other. In that, Hindol made a very good point. If you look at that, I mean, the media called that person the urinator. Like there was the Terminator. The
That Air
oh,
India
right,
guy.
right.
Okay, yeah.
हाँ.
उसके बाद जो चेपा है मीडिया ने उस न्यूज को, जैसे दुनिया का हर आदमी सुसु ही कर रहा था प्लेन में, पता नहीं क्या हो गया था.
No, that Indians are dirty.
Yeah.
You know, it brings back that whole CWG
Yeah, yeah,
thing
yeah,
all over
yeah,
again.
yeah.
That our concept of how to behave in
Hygiene,
an
yeah.
aircraft
Yeah, it's not
is
there.
different from how others are. And we by nature pick fights. And then there was a spate of videos where Indians are misbehaving in aircraft, where we are rude because of the way we talk with, service staff.
Yeah, yeah.
होता भी है या
नहीं,
कुशल?
होता है, मगर मेरा पॉइंट ये है कि
We are.
when we draw
That
conclusion,
There is
two-tada
some-
language
नहीं,
is
नहीं,
there.
हमारी
There is some
कंक्लूजन
truth
ड्रॉ
to
करने
it,
की जो कैपेसिटी है इस देश में, यू लुक एट द डिस्कोर्स शुड बी बेस्ड ऑन डेटा. आप अगर इफ आई वांटेड, आई कैन शो एक आग लगने की न्यूज़, एक स्कर्मिश, वेदर इट्स पंजाब और वेदर इट्स एनी अदर पार्ट ऑफ द कंट्री, ऐसा लगेगा पूरा देश जल रहा है.
But वैसे ही लगता है.
हाँ, मगर अगर आप इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी, जैसे एक बहुत अच्छी बुक आई थी, मैंने अभी रिसेंटली पढ़ी थी, मैं नाम भूल गया हूँ. इट इज़ लिटरली ऑन इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी मैटर्स इन इंडिया. पर कैपिटा क्राइम इंडिया में, इवन अभी जब रायट्स होते हैं, मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूँ कि एक जान भी जाना बहुत दुख की बात है, मगर पॉइंट है कि पहले राइट्स होता था. लुक, यू हैव कवर्ड अ लॉट ऑफ राइट्स. कितने लोग मरते थे. अब लेटेस्ट जो राइट हुआ था लास्ट से दिल्ली में हुआ था, ठीक है. अगर आप कंपेयर करो उस इंटेंसिटी का राइट अगर पुराने इंडिया में होता था, कितने लोग मरते थे. तो द स्टेट कैपेसिटी इज इम्प्रूविंग. वी आर एक्चुअली बिकमिंग बेटर डेली, बट द पॉइंट इज दैट टू सेल ऑप्टिमिज्म is way tougher
No,
than
it's
to
tough.
sell.
Yeah.
So I agree
Yeah.
on this point, and this is my entire point. You see, even in our lifetime, and I'm sure all of us would agree. I mean, when I was a child in India, today it's a very different India. We have improved by leaps and bounds in so many ways. The access that we have, the information we can receive, the technology we have, everything. You know, my father spent his entire lifetime in the railways. You look at the trains today. You know, when I go past Railway Bhavan, उसमें होता था वो colonial एक, you know, remember वो एक
that toy train kind of a thing.
coach का.
Yeah.
Now they have the Vande Bharat train ka, you know,
What a
engine.
beautiful train, man. I just traveled.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
made in India. It's
Yeah.
wonderful, right?
Okay.
So I feel that, look, and this process of correcting history will go on. It's a
Sure.
never-ending process,
Yeah.
right?
Huh.
However, unless we can, in whatever shape and form, and perhaps it can never be done properly, but bring together a certain consensus that, look, we now need to go to a different phase of our national history. We have to get to $5 trillion and then to $10 trillion. We have to get that seat at the Security Council. We have to be among the 3 top economic powers in the world. This needs a national consensus. And if we are constantly, you know, disturbed and, you know, constantly indulgent about incessant warring and bickering, this will not happen.
So-
it requires some sort of national glue.
Warring and bickering will happen when, and maybe it's not such a negative thing, because, you know, if you have uniformity of view, that also is a stagnation. I mean, I
Yeah,
just, that's
sure,
my view, but then
sure.
of course you can contest
No, no.
that. But, you know, we were at all 3 of us were at a lit fest, and there was this one person who said that, you know, this talking about cancel culture, that there was a cancel culture which was prevalent. You talked about how difficult it was to bring out your book. And then the view was that this should not happen now that the other side gets cancelled.
But nobody's getting
No.
cancelled.
So that's what I wanted to
Book
ask
after
you.
book, no. At least in my world, which is publishing, I don't think there is any sort of, hard left or whatever person's book who's getting cancelled. Everybody is blissfully publishing whatever they feel like and saying whatever they feel like, and more power to them.
But it's there, no, in the sense that see the media. There are
Yeah.
many people, many journalists who are saying that that we can't even get column space in a newspaper because our views are something which op-ed publishers will not publish. I can't get a job in any channel because I'm considered left-leaning. So I now am on YouTube. No offense to YouTube, but this is what they're saying is that हमको मतलब they are people who have got award-winning journalists now can find no space. Similarly, filmmakers, they're saying a certain kind
They
of
should
filmmakers.
get their own big business. They know lots of big businesses. If you're talking about the same award-winning journalists, they know many big businesses. They should get them to support and start their own channel.
See, what would they have said? I want to sound as brutal as possible. Again, capitalist too.
Capitalist too.
अपना काम खुद करो. आप लोगों को जब आप लोगों का वर्चस्व था, when you guys were running the show, आपने कौन से राइट विंगर की मदद की थी? हम तो आपको दबा नहीं रहे हैं. हम तो सिर्फ बोल रहे हैं
Find your space.
Find your space. और आपकी जो लिपि है, whatever you write, your script, your thing is not something we can sell. Our audience has... See, the problem of India is India's elites are dinosaurs. India has changed. India today has a vast array of people. This is Indians, the tragedy
You're
of...
talking about that entitled elites.
Yeah.
I mean, there are two types of elites also. Na? Elites तो वो भी पढ़े लिखे लोग हैं जो इतना entitled नहीं हैं. But then there are the entitled elites who have reached that elitism phase just because they're born into it.
Yeah, but आप अब मेरे को एक बात बोलो. मैं अगर आज अपनी कहानी बताता हूँ, मैं तो कोई बैकग्राउंड से नहीं आता हूँ, पॉलिटिकल या सोशल कुछ नहीं. मैं तो अपना बिजनेस कर रहा था. मैंने डिसाइड किया मुझे पॉडकास्ट करनी है. मैंने करनी है. मैं तो किसी के पास गया नहीं. मैंने किसी को नहीं पूछा माइक कौन सा खरीदते हैं. मैंने किसी को नहीं पूछा कैमरा कौन सा खरीदते हैं. मैंने अपने आप गया, यूट्यूब में पढ़ा, कोई किताब उठाई, वो पढ़ी. मैंने अपने आप चालू किया. मैं करते रहा. जो होना था वो हो गया. पॉइंट ये है, मैं तो किसी के पास नहीं गया. मैं तो कोई मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया के पास नहीं गया. भाई मुझे भी बता दे, मेरे को भी बुला ले, भाई हम भी हैं, भाई हम भी हैं. नहीं, मेरे को ज़रूरत नहीं है. मैं आज भी नहीं जाता हूँ. जिसको मुझे सुनना होगा सुनेगा, नहीं सुनना होगा नहीं सुनेगा. कल को मेरा बंद हो जाएगा. I don't know why people are so bothered. Why?
No, I also don't buy this point that people are lost and helpless and they have nowhere to go. Because if you really look at it, and I say this to many of the people who I talk to in the West, for instance, wherever I go. Look, if you're talking about people who criticize the establishment, that has never stopped in India. There's enough and more voices who are constantly criticizing something or the other. It could be state establishment, national establishment, different political parties, different political leaders. In fact, the people who have consistently, criticized the Prime Minister, which of those people have become silent or have disappeared? They're all there. They're thriving. They're consistently putting forward their views. The funniest one, the funniest tweets I ever saw was this person who's a fairly sort of well-known journalist, who was talking about how there was this, the silencing of people. And to which somebody came and said, it's a bit funny that you're talking about silencing of media while being in a media channel, talking every day. That makes no sense.
I think I also saw one TV channel where this very well-known anchor tries to say a silent emergency, and a very eminent lawyer saying, but you are saying it
So
in
then
an
there is-
emergency,
you
in
wouldn't
a
be saying it.
constitutional emergency. No news anchor on a news channel, prime time, can say emergency to a lawyer, an eminent lawyer.
Nita, what they are saying is not what they mean. What they are saying is there is an emergency. What they mean is nobody is listening to us anymore.
Also,
That's
our
what they're
hegemony
saying.
on the discourse is gone.
That's what they're whining about. हमको कोई सुनता नहीं. Was like hashtag sad life.
Sad life.
Hashtag sad life.
No, I think there's definitely
Charlie
been
Brown
this-
wala na. Nobody loves me.
Yeah, it's like, arre, these are all people. I remember this scene from Satish Kaushik's movie. यार मैं तो आदमी बड़ा frustrated हूँ. That kind of a thing.
Huh. But then very well-known people say this. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what makes
that's
it
the
seem
ironical thing.
absurd. Yeah.
You're very well known. You're going to from platform to platform.
Yeah.
You're speaking in every possible,
The
venue.
funniest thing was when the Gujarat elections happen every year, and then analysis happens, and then a known psephologist who sometimes becomes a politician, then sometimes becomes an activist, goes on
A farmer also.
Yes, a farmer also goes on national television in that typical nice soft voice. This is the dark side of democracy. मतलब बेसिकली मेरा बंदा हार गया तो डेमोक्रेसी की डार्क साइड आ गई, मेरा बंदा जीत गया तो डेमोक्रेसी सडनली वेरी गुड हो गई है. आई एक्चुअली वांटेड टू poke fun. I was like, you're a racist. Why are you making it about dark? You mean something else is good?
It's like even the Soros thing, right? Autocratic democracy. Matlab, a democracy that functions but has
Yeah.
a government
Yeah.
that you don't like becomes an autocratic democracy.
And how is it autocratic? If you really sit down with the numbers, in what way? You can say it's autocratic if after 2014, the only party that consistently won in India was the BJP. That is not true. We could count endless number of times, whether it's state, local, or, various other, elections, that the BJP has lost. It has lost major states. What does that show us? It shows that the people of India choose whatever government they want. And if somebody doesn't perform well, they choose not to have that person. And they have chosen to vote for a party twice in the national elections because clearly they believe that that party is delivering for them. Now, if you want to define that as autocratic, it makes no legitimate sense.
But these definitions are important, right? For example, these definitions, historically, we have been told that Aurangzeb, despotic, yes, but I know Kushal is getting all excited as soon as I say Aurangzeb.
Aurangzeb bole se hi matlab
He's thinking about this
1 more
eminent
million
historian.
views.
No, so Aurangzeb to
So वो despotic था, but then he had his nice parts.
You have to see them in context.
ये सब हम पढ़ के आए हैं. Kushal, don't look so shocked.
स्टॉकहोम सिंड्रोम इसी को बोलते हैं ना. वो मुझे रोज मारता है मगर रात में मुझे 2 रोटी खिलाई उसने.
So this is, and I will name also, see, for instance, and this is the moment when Audrey Trushke blocked.
Oh, my favorite.
blocked
वो
me.
तेजा है, उसके पास PhD है.
तो क्या हुआ?
क्या
बहुत लोगों के
हमारे
पास-
बंदे जो
I mean,
है-
I don't want to,
Yeah.
point a finger at myself, but I'm just saying, lots of people have it, let's say, among our friends. I mean,
Yes.
You know the
it's not a
amount of
big deal.
times she has tweeted, that's why I call her Teja ना, कि तेजा मैं हूँ मार किधर है kind of a thing.
No,
वो
the
तेजा
fun
है,
thing
वो
about
PhD
Audrey
है,
Trushke
वो
was,
PhD है.
when I was at Columbia, and there was some debate, and I was saying what you're saying
when
was
I
wrong.
was in Columbia-
No, and I'll tell you
Oh.
why. No, this is important.
बोलिए, sir,
Let me-
बोलिए.
Sorry,
No,
sorry,
I have to
sorry.
tell you this. She told me, oh, what do these people know? In Colombia, this. The fun part was I was at that night when this debate was happening, sitting in my room in Colombia. So I sent her a photograph of the Columbia campus saying, all the statues are weeping at your Columbia degrees, at the lies you're propagating. Audrey Trushke was hilarious. Audrey Trushke began to argue that Aurangzeb should be seen in context. Okay, very well. But Lord Ram should not be seen in context. Anything else in our history should not be seen in context. There, she had particular words, and I don't want to use those words. She used a long, a bunch of words. All that cannot be seen in context. Only Aurangzeb should be seen in context, which is ridiculous. And once we pointed all of these things out, of course, she blocked us and she blocked many other people. But in Audrey Trushke, no one takes her seriously in Western academia also.
Hindu academia आजकल doesn't matter, the social media matters.
That is so true.
Dismantle Hinduphobia to khair, I mean,
I was long
dismantle Hindutva.
ago.
Dismantle Hindutva.
Yeah,
tha.
dismantle.
Long ago, I was in Pakistan and I'd gone to the fort there in Lahore fort. And this was the time when Jodha Akbar was a big success and all that. So I wanted to see कि क्या मतलब. So वहाँ पे there were some Pakistanis also, who had come देखने के लिए and all that. So we were talking and I got talking to them and I was like, what do you think about Jodha Akbar and all? पर ये तो हुआ नहीं था. So I was like, बड़ा ही खराब आदमी था अकबर. And it came as a shock to me because, like, again, I'm a product of CBSE education system. Akbar was like hailed as
Akbar
the
the
great,
Great,
right?
yeah.
Akbar the Great. So I said, नहीं क्यों? Says जोधा तो थी नहीं. ये तो आप लोगों ने हिंदुओं ने ऐसे बोल दिया कि there was a Hindu. वो तो कभी ना शादी करता. No Mughal would have ever married a Hindu. I said, no Mughal would have ever married a Hindu. आपको किसने बोला ये? Saying ना. और यहाँ पे तो हमने देखा ही नहीं जोधा अकबर. And I know for a fact that the movie was seen in Pakistan. They all see it. They see all our movies. They dance to our songs. But they will never admit it openly, right? At least they didn't at that phase. Jab social media was not such a big thing then. But
अब तो गाने गा रहे हैं अली
Yeah.
फजल गाना गा रहे थे. No, so I think the moot point is that, look, so Audrey Trushke was celebrated, and even when she said the terrible thing about Lord Ram, the person she was quoting, that professor, came out and said that this is ridiculous. I never wrote this. This is not my translation. This is something she has made up, right? And it's good that such people get discredited because I think it's very necessary. Now, obviously, some people, extrapolate that into a different world, and then they want to quarrel all the time. And
how important are these quarrels in the academic world? Tell me. मतलब social media में तो चलता रहता है. मेरे को we are used to it. What about
No, there could be career threatening for people.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I know of professors who did not agree with the consensus, so to speak, and the ostracism could be terrible. I mean, you look at what's happening in
Christine
American...
Fair also, if you
Of
remember,
course,
the
and
whole
she
thing.
says this constantly.
Yeah.
And there are many others. If you look at American and British academia, if you don't agree with the broad alignment, the ostracism can be terrible. But let me tell you how India is changing, and it's very interesting. Both of you might know that the Ramakrishna Mission allowed this, terrible, quote-unquote, academic access to their archives. Who wrote this terrible book called Kali's Child?
Jeffrey Kripal.
Jeffrey Kripal. And he totally manipulated the poor monks. They didn't realize. They were like, okay, somebody, and they took him in good faith. But what has happened because of that experience is, today, I know of many other academics who have tried to reach the Ramakrishna Mission, Western academics. They say no. They say no very politely, but they say no to everybody. And what they do instead is, they give their archives to their own monks who also have PhDs from various Ivy League universities and so on and so forth to do the work. The problem is, Smita, if you look at Western academia, let's say Islamic studies, it is always headed by practicing Muslims, often clerics. If you look at Buddhist studies, they are all believing Buddhists, they are practicing Buddhists. Often they are Buddhist monks. Often in Hindu studies or Hinduism studies, it is always led by professors
Marxists.
who hate Marxists, who only have bad things to say about Hinduism. Now, I'm not saying don't criticize. Sure, you could have a critical approach. That's part of academia. But to only have that as the mainstay, to never have a believing Hindu as the head of a Hinduism studies department is a huge problem.
Right.
It's a massive problem. You please, if you ever put a researcher to the job, compare the departments in all top, religious schools in America or the UK.
Yeah.
Study the Buddhist department, the Islamic studies department, and the Hinduism studies department.
I'll corroborate this with my experience at York University, Canada. This is the year 2001 and 2002. I went into the library. I wanted to read books on India and Hinduism. All the books were either written by white people who are not Hindus, who usually were Marxists, or were written by Indians who were brown but were Marxists.
Yeah.
So basically, they were all Marxists.
Kushal, even on Kashmir, in academia, now if anybody tries to say that this abrogation was a good thing, cancelled.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's
For
over.
sure.
If you try to say that the rule of gun has been crushed in Kashmir or is being crushed in Kashmir, cancelled. That's happening there. In media, doesn't matter. It's slowly, we are filtering
But
out,
you-
or that is
you know what?
happening. That multiplicity of views, good.
But this is an excellent example. I want to come in here and point out why this is true. You have hit the nail on the head. Why? Why is this true? Because where is the power of the media? because Indian media is very powerful. All the Hinduism studies departments are in the West. You name a good Hinduism studies department
It's
in
not
India.
there in India.
Yeah.
Indians quote, and this is the most ironic thing, not just in Hinduism studies. Tell me, do you know of a single country in the world where the scholars of that country or writers of that country
All reside outside
quote
India.
Westerners and their viewpoints to about their own countries? Say, इसने ये बोला था. That's why my country is like this. Can you name a single American who quotes an Indian to say America is like this? Can you name a single British person who quotes an Indian to say actually England is like this? We have never studied these countries.
Yeah.
You see, no Indian even dares to say, I have written a definitive book about America. You tell me which Indian has ever said, I have written a definitive book about England or America. यहाँ पे तो हर रोज a Westerner is saying, I've written a definitive book about India. और उसी को हम कोट करते हैं कि ये देखो, ये है हमारी
नहीं,
देश
मगर
की
उसका
सच्चाई।
रीजन है. आई थिंक देयर इज समथिंग टू डू एट अ कल्चरल लेवल एंड वेयर आई थिंक द मोनोथेइस्टिक mindset is very expansionist by nature, and that mindset stems in all forms. So people don't want to accept this, but even Marxism or the Marxist way, like academia is a religion in itself, and they have their own purity and pollution tests, and they
Okay,
have
that's
their
a very
own.
nice way of saying it. That's
It
where-
is purity and pollution, and
Yeah.
you won't believe it. Like I was in Austin, Texas. I can't name the person, the department, because that person is literally the top of the line person in that field in the world. I can't even state the field because वो एक ही है और वो पता लग जाता है. That person says that person was made to sign a diversity, equity, inclusion statement. It is like a religious prayer you are giving. कलमा पढ़ा रहे हैं वो. कलमा पढ़ लिया, हो गए मुसलमान. डाइवर्सिटी इक्विटी इंक्लूजन स्टेटमेंट साइन कर दिया, हो गए तुम स्कॉलर. अब तुम जो लिखोगे लिखोगे, मुझे कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. दिस इज अ कॉन्सेप्ट क्रीप दैट स्टेम्स डायरेक्टली फ्रॉम अ मोनोथियस्टिक माइंडसेट एंड इट इज़ नेवर गोइंग टू गो अवे. यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू. और दूसरा एक हमारी प्रॉब्लम ये है कि हम कल्चरली काफ़ी आइसोलेशनिस्ट हो गए हैं. हम लोग क्यों लिखेंगे अमेरिका के ऊपर? हम अपने ऊपर तो नहीं लिखते, हम उनके ऊपर क्या खास लिखेंगे? वी डोंट इवन राइट अबाउट आवरसेल्व्स. टुडे लेट्स से I tend to read and research. All the reading and research for my podcast is done by me. I have to rely on so many outside texts. Why? Because if I try to look at Indian text, it is either not very well written. There are barely very well written. Like, I know, I've whined about this to Hindol privately so many times. Hindol knows about it. Like, you barely get good books to read in India. Second, the ones that write, they are such fantastic claims that you're like, wait, what? अच्छा, हमारी सिविलाइजेशन 50,000 साल पुरानी है. अच्छा, ये मतलब ऐसे सब लोग क्लेम करते हैं. एंड these things are see, my worry about the
Are getting publishers.
non-left is that nonsense gets published and see
तो चलेगा ना. See,
मगर
this I
उसको
don't have-
एकेडमिक अप्रूवल मत दो ना.
मत दो.
स्मिता,
अच्छा,
मेरा
okay.
ये कहना है कि अगर सीरियस आज अगर हिंडोल को
यार
साइट
तुम
करना
आर्चीज
चाहिए.
कॉमिक से लेके अमर चित्र कथा से लेके कुछ भी
मुझे
publish
एंशिएंट
करना।
एलियंस से कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं
हाँ।
है. एंशिएंट एलियंस होना चाहिए, मगर पॉइंट है कि एंशिएंट एलियंस को साइट मत करो कि ये एकेडमिक है.
Academic, okay.
प्रॉब्लम
No, and
ये
this
है.
is a big problem, and what she's saying is a big problem. You know, one of India's finest scientists, a Nobel Prize winner, attended one of our great national science, whatever we have, circus we
Yes.
have, and was so disgusted, actually wrote about it, saying this is, you can say whatever you feel like, that's fine, but this is a gathering of scientists. We should be talking about science. You cannot say anything fanciful, you know, whatever you think of.
Yeah.
So if we insist on making ourselves a circus, if we insist on opening ourselves to ridicule,
take you
then
seriously?
who will take you seriously?
Correct.
Tell me, every major American and British and other institutions have a South Asia Studies department. Do you know of a single America Studies department or a Britain Studies department in India? Do we have the confidence to turn the gaze? To Twitter में तो हम हमेशा कहते हैं turn the gaze, but turn the gaze वहाँ पे होता है कि selfie ले रहे हैं. You know? तो वो सेल्फी लेने से नहीं होता ना बात, you know.
Right, I get what
So
you're
then
saying.
turn the gaze. If you really want to turn the gaze, build that rigor to turn the gaze properly.
या बट हम लोग की जो टर्निंग द गेज सोशल मीडिया पे होती है वो क्या होती है? एंड अगेन मुझे गालियाँ पड़ेंगी, दे देना, कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता है.
who are you saying this to?
नहीं,
The
बहुत है।
viewers and listeners.
वो नहीं पढ़ने वाली है मुझे मालूम। अब जो मैं
The
कहूँगा
YouTube comment section.
नहीं,
you know,
होता है।
It's the old world rediff में होता है ना comment section. It's that.
नहीं मतलब इट्स सेसफुल बट जो भी है, जो रिवर्स द गेज आजकल क्या होता है, सोशल मीडिया रिवर्स द गेज। सैन फ्रांसिस्को में एक स्ट्रीट है जहाँ पे लोग ओपन डेफिकेशन कर रहे हैं। इसका मतलब पूरा अमेरिका ओपन डेफिकेशन कर रहा है। वो प्यार किए जाएगा सीन याद है, ओम प्रकाश बैठा है, महमूद बैठा है और
I
दो
love your
बहनें बैठी है,
Bollywood
ठीक है,
references.
और उसमें बोलता है कैमरा कुत्ते की आंखों पर, कुत्ते की आंखों से पानी आ रहे हैं, कैमरा आसमान पर, यानी दुनिया भर के कुत्ते रो रहे हैं।
I do not know this film. I will watch it.
Please, it is one of the best movies ever. प्यार किए जा, it is a copy of a South Indian film. प्यार किए जा, महमूद की है। आजकल का जो डिस्कोर्स है ना, सोशल मीडिया का डिस्कोर्स, वेदर इट्स द लेफ्ट और द सो कॉल्ड राइट विंग इन इंडिया, वो यही है।
कि America is on the decline.
Decline.
And so this jingoism.
Oh, it's $20
like-
trillion dollars. People have no idea.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You cannot even fathom what
नहीं,
a
मगर
$20
मैं
trillion
कहना ये चाह रहा
economy
था कि
growing at 3% means.
This is the reversing the gaze that happens
It's just
from our end.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
हमारी reversing the gaze है कि हम भी पॉटी कर रहे तो तुम भी पॉटी
You know, you
करते
have
हो।
how many scatological references I've noticed.
No, but yeah, you know, there is a lot of
There
this
is-
chess beating
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
of course,
happening.
of course.
That look, American cities are on the decline.
And
There
we
is
are so-
violence on the
Yeah.
streets in America. These anecdotal things are taken out of context and said that we are becoming Vishwaguru, whereas they are on the decline.
No, and all of this is highly, highly overstated. It's a bit like, you know, what is Twitter history, right? Twitter history from whatever end,
Twitter
left,
history,
right,
I like
whatever.
this term.
Yeah. Twitter history is basically you pick up
Nasal.
you pick up something and you of course don't have the tenacity to read it. You take your cell phone out first. And you see line कहाँ दिखा रहा है, अच्छा एक line का फोटो ले लो हाँ, then you quickly tweet it saying ये एक line में whatever, immediately like this, you know, there's this film Amitabh Bachchan made called Jhund, you know, the Jhund, the packs of, you know, will crawl out from somewhere.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, you know, this is not right left, this is Twitter in general.
This is most people on social media.
So, and sometimes I have noticed that you are not even reading the sentence before that sentence that you're photographed.
Yeah.
Because that sentence explains why this, you know, this is how writing happens as a sentence.
But you know, Hindol, this is
It's
something that Kushal also mentioned.
Yeah.
That we are entering that phase. I mean, if I was to just think about my nephews and nieces, how many of them read?
Yeah.
You know, we are entering into a phase of Twitter shorts, tweets, Instagram, where reading is not a habit at all, and in depth to kuch bhi nahi.
But do you know, children's book sales have never been higher in
Higher
the world.
again.
Yeah,
but then
so-
also we are talking about our population. यहाँ पे कुछ
तो
भी
I guess-
मतलब कुछ भी बिक जाता है, पिक्चर भी बिक
ऐसा
जाती
नहीं
है,
है यार।
अक्षय कुमार की फिल्में बेचारों
अगर
को छोड़
शॉर्ट्स
के.
चल रही हैं तो podcasts have taken off in India too.
Yeah, that long form also.
Long form. But it's so interesting. I mean, if you talk to create YouTube as a company, I'm sure everybody, even A&I must be talking to YouTube. What
Yeah.
do they say? सर 15 मिनट की वीडियो मत बनाना,
हाँ.
या 60 सेकंड की बनाना, या 30 मिनट के ऊपर वाली बनाना. या लोग एकदम लंबा देखना शुरू हो गए हैं, या एकदम छोटा देखना शुरू हो गए हैं. So it is weird. So we have a bit of everything, but what we need, what we lack. See, my focus is where we lack. What we lack in India is serious academic discourse, and
need
that
rigor.
should not happen on social media. Social media is not built for academic discourse. Social media by design is built for shock jocks. Social media is built for that woman who sung Tip Tip Barsa Pani in that horrendous voice, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But the point is, it is not meant for हिंडोल आएगा और वो 20 मिनट का नुआंस देगा और लोग बोलेंगे अरे भाई इधर से तू क्यों कर रहा है, मेरे को नहीं सुनना तुझे. That's the
But
point.
you know who gets our historians, since you're a historian too, and you've written, you know, more than just history you've written. Is it necessary to be successful on social media for
बिल्कुल नहीं.
people to
बिल्कुल
read
नहीं.
your
No.
books?
And also social media can be done well. Let me give you one example, right? Two examples I'll give you. Both from England, right? Both professors. Look at the social media Twitter feed of a man called Robert Macfarlane. Robert Macfarlane is one of the world's best writers on nature. He writes beautifully on nature, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't engage on anything but nature. Every day he puts up a nice photograph. He will tell you something interesting about an animal, a bird. He has more than 1 million followers on Twitter. Look at a historian called Peter Frankopan, right? Who only writes about the Silk Roads. Central Asia is his area of expertise. Again, he'll give you some historical nugget, this, that. He never engages on contemporary politics. Again, thousands of followers. I'm saying you should use the tool the way it should have been used. We don't have to use it only for diatribe. We can use it better. And is it necessary? Look, we all have to do social media. I mean, I do social media because my work requires it. Am I always happy doing it? Maybe not. I mean, I have started to do more of like Instagram, though I don't know. I'm not a very good photographer. I don't know what to click every day and I can't take videos of myself, So, but I realized that that's one of the ways. So what I've started doing, I learned from Robert McFarlane. He takes beautiful photographs of nature. So I have started to take book photographs, whatever I'm reading at that point.
Reading, yeah.
Right?
And you also interview so many authors.
Yeah.
And this is a new trend. What I'm seeing is that kuch saal pehle, writers were not celebs. Writers were ignored. Maybe book chhap gaya. I'm sorry, Hindol, but that's the truth, isn't
It's
it?
perfectly fine.
But now, किसी का किताब निकला बोले तो सबके podcast में जाओ, lit fest में जाओ.
अच्छा है ना?
अच्छा है ना?
It's
That's
so
what I'm
nice.
saying.
It's very good.
That where were they? I was just thinking, where were these guys 5 years ago, 6 years ago? Now you're seeing, I used to pick up books anyway, right? Just read. But now I'm getting to know the author.
Yeah.
Which is so fantastic.
That's a great change, and a lot of authors are not comfortable about it. Many of my friends are very
No,
uncomfortable.
yeah,
They
correct.
want to do their work, and the work to speak for themselves. But I don't think it's enough anymore for the work to speak for itself.
Yeah.
The author also has to speak for the work. That's
but
a big
like you
change.
interview authors, right?
Yeah.
I've seen with the author that they only want to talk about the book. But like as a student of literature, when I would read, say, a Shakespeare or anybody, agar tum Odyssey bhi पढ़ रहे हो, you need to know the mind of the author. क्या हुआ उसके साथ? Or you're reading Freud. You need to know about Freud. But you try to talk to authors. It's only now that the authors would like to speak a little bit about themselves when they talk about their book. Do you find that hesitation?
Sometimes maybe, but most of the times, like I have spoken to so many now. I've done more than 90 books now.
Yeah.
But maybe it comes from whom they are speaking to as well.
Okay.
The one thing I have found is that,
You read your books.
yeah, I read.
That's right.
Like, he's there. He knows I read.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
Not just me, even people I know who have read my books and have seen my conversations with Kushal and have seen other interviews I've done or conversations I've done with other people, consistently have come back and told me that his conversations are one of the best because he's actually read the book.
Yeah.
He's not randomly asking you questions. He's read the book, he's thought about the subject, and he has original questions, something that he wants to know. ऐसा नहीं कि कोई भी किताब उठा लिया कि अच्छा चलो ये टॉपिक है तो 5 क्वेश्चन पूछ लो. अच्छा हिंदुइज्म टॉपिक है, चलो एक बार थोड़ा अयोध्या के बारे में पूछ लो, ये भी पूछ लो.
Which is what news anchors do, huh?
He actually engages with the book.
With the book, yeah.
You
So
know?
there are many, like there's this one news anchor, very sweetly, she told me कि तुम ये podcast ना कभी बंद मत करना. So I said, no, it's very exhausting ना. तो he said, नहीं ये authors के साथ ना ये podcast ज़रूर करना because हमारे लिए research हो जाता है पूरा, book पढ़ने की ज़रूरत नहीं होती है. Very honestly, because obviously they are anchors, they need to run around and do a whole host of other things, but it's become secondary research material, primary research material for their news shows.
But I want to ask you, since you're a very senior journalist, tell me, I did a brief stint in television, I don't know that much, but I really want to know, why are news anchors in India so ill-read? What is the issue?
I'm sorry, I can't control my laugh.
But it's really true. I am astonished. I go for a lot of these TV debates.
I know.
You're like, forget your guests. You have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm astonished that they're even on why are they there?
If they're discussing a book, yes, then you feel bad that भाई पढ़ के तो आते ना.
I have known, मैं नाम नहीं लेना, वो लोग Amazon के review पढ़ के interview करते हैं.
Yeah. And then they boast that they got the first interview with the author.
Amazon, मैं मजाक नहीं कर रहा हूँ, Amazon के review पढ़े हुए हैं.
Vicky.
मतलब शर्म नहीं आती लोगों को.
Well, see, there are many film critics also who have not seen the film, and they sit, they sit with the actors, and then they pontificate when they have not seen that person's films, pehle ke films or abhi ke films. I did that once very early in my career. I went to interview, and it was told to me just maybe half hour before I was doing this show for Doordarshan, and I was told by Doordarshan, जाओ शशि तरूर को interview करके आओ on his book Riot. अब आधे घंटे में किताब मैं कहाँ पढ़ लूँगी, So and of course I wasn't on camera, so I don't have to do any makeup or anything. So half an hour I quickly read the book, ऊपर से whatever I could read, and I did the questions. And I sat down just before the interview and I told him, I have not read your book. I'm going to be 100% honest. I've just been told half an hour before that I have to interview you. And, in those days, you couldn't call up the publisher and say, ki kitab de do. You have to run to Bari Sons or whatever, pick up the book. And it's not like, you can order it online or anything. Us time mein kuch nahi tha. But the shame of going to an author and interviewing him and doing a full-length interview of 40 minutes or whatever it was. And nice of him that he had engaged in conversation, and the book was The Riot, or Riots, or whatever it was called, Riot. Right. And we talked generally about Riot, and, I read some portions of the book and we did it, but I was so ashamed after that I have never again done that. Never interviewed an author without reading.
And let me tell you, the author, because I've been told this by many authors, that they know whether someone has read the book or not.
Of course. No, absolutely. But you see, both of you are talking about something very important. We keep saying, why is the public discourse so bad in India? It is because many people who are on television especially never do any research, never read anything. I know so many anchors who say, oh, I don't read books. If you don't read books, if you don't read anything serious, even if you don't even read long format, researched articles, right? How are you pontificating one day about Ukraine, the next day about religion, the third day about geopolitics? You don't know anything about these subjects, which is why on Indian television, guests get away by saying anything.
Yeah.
Because the anchor cannot challenge them. It's whatever, and that's why people are fighting with each other. Because the anchor anyway doesn't know. They're like, chalo, bhir jao.
So ये तो सबसे best strategy है ना. अगर if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, you baffle them with bullshit.
No, and anchors, that's what they do.
ज्ञान, कुशल, ज्ञान.
हाँ, तो वो तो आके वो बॉक्सिंग मैच की तरह होता है ना कि आप आके आप ताली मार दिया आपने, बस वो लड़ने लग गया, आप बैठे रहो. चलो हो गया आधा घंटा.
But when you go to college campuses and you speak with children and all, I rarely say no when I'm invited, because I want to know what young people think, what young people, and all of them say this, that why are people shouting, why can't you tell the anchor? But I say, पर मत देखो ना फिर. If that bothers you, देखते वही हैं. They judge television news by that debate, not whole day news चलता है, कोई नहीं देखता.
Reportage main होती है.
Yeah.
पर रिपोर्टाज भी तो बंद हो गया यार. वो पैकेजेस जिसको हम कहते थे back in the day, where you would have a voice over, you'll have lots of shots, whatever, and these bites, and at the end a piece to camera. How many such packages are even run?
है यार, देख तू 24 घंटे में कितनी खबर निकालेगा. We have to be fair to the media also. क्या रोज तुम्हारे लिए सनसनीखेज खबर तो नहीं होगी. मेरे को सबसे
पर वो बिकता नहीं है, जो दिखता नहीं वो बिकता नहीं है. So like for example, the day we are recording this, elections, voting is happening in Nagaland and Meghalaya. I want to see how many would bother with doing a debate on elections in the Northeast. How many will bother to show polling taking place? And here polling, you're talking about Nagaland. I mean, our parents are of a generation where they thought that Nagaland would secede from India.
Yeah.
And today, thriving democracy happening, but it's not a story. Why? Because many of our journalists have not read about that era, have not discussed it with their parents about that era. In fact, I must say this. There was this one gentleman I met, and he said, I spent the good part of my youth in NEFA.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
He was in the forge. I said, I spent a good part. I didn't have family life. But if I say NEFA, people don't know. And I think that I spent so much of my life protecting a country. Whose fault is it now? Is it the fault of our historians, contemporary history? Is it the fault of our leaders? Is it the fault of the media that बच्चों को सिखाया नहीं, हम लोगों के generation को पता भी नहीं?
So I have an answer to this.
Tell
My
me.
answer is this. The primary fault is a lack of connectivity. For a long time, what we describe as the peripheries of our country, right? Peripheries are very important for the sovereignty of a country. The peripheries of our country were inaccessible for many people. In the Northeast that we were discussing, there is still an inner line permit, right? So many people would hesitate to go to those places. Sardar Patel warned of this. In his letter, in his dying days, he wrote 2 letters to Girija Shankar Bajpai and to Pandit Nehru. He warned that if these peripheries, including Jammu and Kashmir, the Northeast and so on and so forth, are not connected more deeply using better infrastructure, then there's going to be problem there because they will never be adequately connected to the mainland. This is exactly what has happened. In fact, if you read those 2 letters, Smita, everything that Patel said would happen in India happened. China came and, messed us up. We lost the war. Missionary activity in the Northeast. Demographic change in the Northeast. Kashmir went to the dogs. Everything he mentioned came true. And he had warned of each of these points almost in a bullet point format in these 2 letters. This is what happened. There was no connectivity. Arunachal mein airport abhi aaya hai. 2 years ago, I went to Arunachal Pradesh for something. They were saying chopper, but I'm not getting up on a chopper in the Northeast.
No, yeah.
So no chance.
I'm not getting up on a chopper ever.
So we went to Guwahati and then took the train to Itanagar, right? So now finally we have tell me, why did it have to wait for 75 years to get an airport in Arunachal Pradesh? So there is a connectivity problem. Our peripheries were unknown to us. Today we have a record number of people going to Kashmir. This should have always happened. So this is the problem.
Okay. Tell me about this, that, we were, Hindol also brought it up, that about liberalism in Europe and America. Since you've lived there, there's this crusading spirit that liberalism has. Like in return for toleration, it demands something in return. Submission from another group. So that acceptance that one race is superior to the other race, hum maan rahe hain, give it to us, submit to us, and that is the liberal part about us. Now collate that with India. Did you see that? Do you see that since you've lived in both countries?
The difference between India and the West, the biggest for me, and I think Rajiv Malhotra explained this beautifully in Being Different in his book. I think, people deny civilizations and civilizational states, but even the West is a civilizational state. Even India is a civilizational state. The West was built on a Judeo-Christian or Greco-Roman ethic, and it became more Judeo-Christian, less Greco-Roman over the period of time. Whatever Enlightenment is, it's actually, people may not agree with me, is a pagan influence on that. Unlike a lot of people like Tom Holland, who is a historian in England, I actually disagree with Holland's hypothesis because he thinks everything is because they are Christian. Au contraire, they are liberal despite of being Christian. The reason is that at its core edifice, if you are a monotheistic society, these are realities which people need to deal with. Monotheism cannot give you mutual respect or equal respect, as Swami Vivekananda called it, equal respect. Or even Sitaram Goel used the word equal respect in one of his books. That society at best can give you tolerance. So even the liberalism that stemmed over there can only give you tolerance. As in, when you say my God is the only God, and अभी क्या करें, अभी रहना तो है साथ में because समाज चेंज हो गया है, तो चल मैं तेरे को टॉलरेट करता हूँ. दैट्स लाइक हम लोग यहाँ पे बैठे और हम में से कोई किसी को बोलेगा अब मैं तुम दोनों को टॉलरेट कर रहा हूँ. दैट्स सो कॉन्डेसेंडिंग, विच इज़ वेरी अनलाइक the way we are. I'm not saying we are perfect. We have many problems in our society too. But at its core, we are a product of our civilization and our epistemologies. Our epistemologies are built on mutual respect. Which is why, despite me being an open disbeliever, nobody by and large says, like, people don't understand. People think India में सिर्फ 2% atheists हैं क्योंकि सेंसस बोलता है. इनको आइडिया नहीं है कि अगर मेरे घर में सेंसस ब्यूरो आता है और मुझे बोलता है एथिस्ट और हिंदू, मैं बोलता हूँ हिंदू. और मेरे जैसे लाखों नहीं करोड़ों बच्चे हैं,
Yeah.
क्योंकि मुझे म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट मिलती है. मेरे दर्शन को भी सर्वदर्शन संग्रह में रखा जाता है. So this is a very big difference between the two cultures. So the liberalism also will have its own avatars. The liberalism in the West, it's not like I have a problem with it. I'm pretty liberal myself. But they stem from a very different reality, which is why even disbelief in the West, in its form of new atheism, which was very famously, celebrated by Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, and Sam Harris, the four horsemen, is very different from, let's say, disbelief in India. A disbeliever like me, मैं थोड़ी ना जाके किसी को उंगल करता रहता हूँ कि ए तू भगवान में मानता है. I have never done it. In fact, I have discussed, like the last time Hindol was on my podcast, we discussed Srila Prabhupada. मैं थोड़ी ना बैठ के बोल रहा था अरे प्रभुपाद के ये belief क्यों है या ऐसे क्यों है?
That other book which did
The one that I just wrote.
Yeah.
So for our mind is different. My biggest experience of living in the West was how at best they can grudgingly give you a seat at the intellectual table. Sometimes you don't even get a seat at the table, which Hindol hinted at when it comes to Hindu studies. You literally have to knock the door out and enter that room and scream कि ये मेरा धर्म है, मुझे बोलने दे. It stems from monotheism. People don't like it. And when I say monotheism, I mean monopolistic monotheism. Because even Zoroastrianism is monotheism in that sense. But when it becomes monopolistic monotheism, it is a huge problem. And people do, I don't know why people deny human beings have influences on them. हम लोग मतलब हम जिस समाज में पैदा होते हैं हम उसकी उपज होंगे. इसीलिए आज हम लोग प्रिविलेज की बात करते हैं. मैं एक सबसे बड़ी प्रिविलेज बोलता हूँ, हिंदू प्रिविलेज. हम सब वी ऑल हैव हिंदू प्रिविलेज. वी आर born in a system that breeds pluralism. People don't realize what privilege we have. We just take it for granted कि हम एक सिस्टम में है कि जहाँ पे आप एक संप्रदाय से हो गए, ये एक संप्रदाय से होगा और मैं एक अलग ही दर्शन से हूँ और हम तीनों बैठ के यहाँ पे बात कर पा रहे हैं. ये हमारी प्रिविलेज है.
Is pluralism under threat?
No,
Because
I don't think it has ever been under threat.
If you listen to some of our TV anchors, they say, and they bring in experts, historians also, who say that this new narratives which are coming, it's going to put pluralism under threat. I think that's going to be the last question.
I don't think it's under threat, and I don't think it'll ever be under threat. We are going through a churn. And societies go through this churn, where things are evaluated, re-evaluated. As a historian, you have to understand that in most parts of the world, every generation reimagines their national icons or their national iconic events. In India, we have never done that. We have always kept it at ye aise hua tha, and generations after that will believe that. I think we're going through a process where we are re-evaluating everything. Who were our founding fathers? Were they all what we have been taught, or were they something different, right? And all of this re-evaluation is very important. The difference between the West and the East represented by India is this. The pluralism that we talk about, and there's been a lot of work done on this, comes from a fundamental idea of time. You see, the West always looks at time in a linear way. Our idea of time is cyclical. Now, when you have a cyclical, imagination of time, you know that something will end and then again the cycle will be repeated. But if you don't believe that, you only know that there is a beginning and the end. And if I don't make it, quote unquote, by the time end comes, then that's it, it's finished. Whereas we don't think about it like that. And of course, now, if one had to get into a quarrel, somebody would say, no, this is about rebirth and, you're not pushing Hindu beliefs. No, and there's a lot of interesting work that's being done on this. This fundamental reimagination of what time means in different cultures has a real bearing on everything downstream. So we have a different way of looking at time itself. And that has a downstream impact on what we're talking around this table, our pluralism. I don't think anybody can ever take away our pluralism. I think as long as India remains predominantly Hindu, it will remain inherently plural. However, will there be all these collisions and clashes and in the churn? Yes. And we have to work to localize them and contain them. But I have a firm belief that India will remain plural and it will fulfill its manifest destiny in the years to come. This is my private belief.
But can I say we have to be cautious at the same time? as much I'm telling you, the one privilege we take for granted is our Hindu privilege. We take pluralism for granted. We don't even realize how easy it is for us to just accept another. The Greeks came in, they merged. They just merged with us. The Parsis, there are one after the other examples of people coming in this society, and this society just accepts it.
Karwa बढ़ता गया, that whole bit.
And we don't value it, which is why we always have to be cautious that if you truly want to save dharma, जो so-called social media warriors होते हैं, you have to fight for pluralism, and that pluralism includes begrudgingly even Marxists. You have to make sure that they also have a say in society. Now, somebody might say, oh, Karl Popper said you cannot tolerate the intolerant. Well, the debate is whether we call them intolerant or not. Maybe some are not.
पर वो भी चलेगा.
हाँ, मगर अगर हमने ये खो दिया, तो हमने सब कुछ खो दिया. So, while I am also not worried, but I always like to point this out, that fight for your pluralism, because तुम्हारा धर्म नहीं रहेगा नहीं तो फिर वो खत्म, फिर तुम भी एक monopolistic, monotheistic, boring सा system हो जाओगे, जिसमें simple बड़ा है system, वो एक prophet है, फिर एक एंजल आया, वो एंजल ने प्रॉफिट को बोला, प्रॉफिट वो वहाँ से भगवान की बोली आई, वो हो गया, काम खत्म, पैसा हजम, आगे बढ़ो जवान.
But we can question. That's what
and I think
that
India,
multiplicity of views
absolutely.
and the questioning spirit, jigyasa, that questioning spirit, that has to be kept alive in a democracy.
And India
like
really
ours.
has a third way. India is never going to be entirely communist, never going to be entirely Marxist or capitalist. India is not an extreme country. We will never be as capitalistic as America or as communist as Russia or China. We have a middle path. We really do. It's that we Indians, all of us, fail to recognize this. हमारा path है, आप देखिएगा, हमारे समाज में ना कोई भी कुछ extreme बहुत करने लगता है ना, उसका एक moderation हो जाता है.
Yeah.
We don't like as a people anybody very extreme. चलो आप भी थोड़ा झगड़ लो, whatever. Finally, let's... it's really like a family कि चलो ठीक है.
That some patriarch will come and say झगड़ा बंद करो, let's get together and bring that रूठा हुआ uncle back to the fold.
Exactly. कोई रूठा हुआ मौसा जी होगी, कोई मामी जी होगी, whatever. चलो झगड़ा कर लिया, now get together.
Yeah. Okay.
On that positive note.
Thank you so much, Hindol. Thank you so much, Kushal. And look forward to your next book and look forward to your next podcast.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste. Jai Hind. Click here to watch the previous episodes.